This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim.
Welcome to At the Meeting. My name is Montse Torremorell, and I have with me Tom Wetzel. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Montse. Good to be here. Looking forward to talking about our favorite subject today, pork.
Yes, it's good to have you. I also have with me Dr. Gordon Sprong. Hi, Gordon.
Morning, Tom. Morning, Montse, and morning, David. But we'll get to you in a second. Yeah, good morning.
It's good to see you, Gordon. So today we want to talk about our favorite product. Pork, as Tom was saying. And more specifically, we want to talk about pork consumption in the U.S. and internationally, and understand the trends on pork consumption by the various generations of consumers. We also want to better understand what role pork plays in the overall landscape of affordable, sustainable, environmentally friendly, and nutritious proteins. So to dive into this important topic, we have invited David Newman, who is the Senior Vice President for Market Growth at the National Pork Board. David provides oversight of international marketing, domestic market development, and human nutrition, health, and wellness programs. Welcome, David.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Welcome.
It's very good to have you. So before we get started and we dive into all this important topic and help us understand what's going on with pork consumption and pork demand, tell us more about yourself. I understand you joined National Pork Board about a year ago.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've been with the National Pork Board now for about a year as the leader in the market growth area. As you mentioned, Montse, I oversee our international market development team, our domestic market development team, and then our human nutrition, health, and wellness platform. So a little bit of my background. I was born and raised in a diversified livestock operation in South Central Missouri. We've had a farrow to finish operation. I'm third generation in the pork business. So the pig business is also my favorite subject, very near and dear to me. I actually did a PhD in meat science, muscle biology. So I'm just as I tell people, I'm just a really overeducated butcher at the end of the day. And also I focused on international agriculture, international market development, and being in the pig business and also in the meat business for the last 20 years in marketing and sales, and just really understanding the farm to table connection of our business led me to really be involved very heavily in our business from even a service aspect. So outside of that, I have two kids, 8 and 11, and raising them on the farm the right way. So excited to be a part of this event here today as well.
Excellent. So, David, give us the high level, picture about pork consumption. Where are we and where are we going?
We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, right? I know that on this audience here, we're big fans of pork. The reality of the situation is today is that if we look at long-term consumption patterns across proteins, even competing proteins, we do have a large portion of the pork market that is at risk. And to describe that a little bit further is we really need to think about the category in two different ways. We need to think about where processed pork is going and then where the fresh pork business is going. And you've got two entirely different trends there that we need to think about when we talk about consumers. So it's a combination of product sort, product mix. What does the consumer want to eat? And then it's going to be combined, and we're going to have a conversation about who is the future consumer of pork. And that really is based, we can take a really deep dive into that because we need to understand the next generation of consumer, what they want, where they want to shop, how they want to shop, all the way down to things like portion size, those are really important factors that we need to analyze when we think about the fact of, in this business, I say this every day to our team and other producers as well. The entire pork business relies on one simple fact, that a consumer walks into a retail grocery store or a food service restaurant, they buy a piece of pork, they either cook it or have it cooked for them, and they eat it and they like it enough to do that again.
Yeah.
And if that stops, then this whole cycle ends regardless of what sector of the business you're in.
David,
right.
you mentioned process versus fresh, and at a high level, what does that mean from your perspective of the difference between those two kind of products?
Great question, Tom. So processed is going to be anything that is further processed. Bacon, sausage, the two primary processed ingredients we think about. Fresh is going to be most of the items you're going to find in a traditional grocery store in the United States today. Fresh pork loin chops, a fresh roast, those type of items. So anything that is further processed, meaning we've manufactured that into something, and thank God for bacon, right? And our business,
right.
We just break those categorically into two pieces.
So would that include if you go to your frozen section and you've got ready to eat meals there that include pork, would that be under the processed or fresh?
That would be under processed. Now there are some ready to eat meals that have fresh pork in them, but most of that stuff is further processed, pre-cooked. Yep.
So, David, you did a nice job of opening the current situation in the U.S. Does that apply also internationally? Because we aspire to service our international buyers, also our consumers. So, is this the same? Are the trends in Europe or the trends in Asia the same as the trends in the U.S.?
Wow, that is a very big question, Gordon. The reason the National Pork Board and our International Market Development Team works so closely with the United States Meat Export Federation, they're our largest partner at the National Pork Board, is because that team has 90 people on the ground in more than 50 countries around the world. And so, there is a big difference between customers, for example, in very mature markets, Gordon, like Japan, South Korea, versus emerging markets like the Philippines, as an example, or even potentially Africa down the road. What I would say about that is the economic situation obviously drives a huge component of that, which is why the bulk of our strength in the business here is exporting offal items around the world. Because in the United States, where we're in a much more mature economic situation, we don't eat a lot of kidneys, and we don't eat a lot of tongues, and we don't eat a lot of bungs and ears. But there are billions of people around the world that do. And so we are starting to see different patterns. And certainly we mimic some of those, or we at least strive to understand them, because some of the trends that are happening around the rest of the world are actually coming the other direction here into the U.S. So yes, we do think about and analyze and collect that on a daily basis.
So you're doing, a follow-up question. You're doing a great job of describing the landscape. How do you measure it when you say, okay, I'm going to get up today and I'm responsible for market growth? How do you measure whether you did your job at the end of the day, David?
The two words I use a lot is volume and value. Are we moving more pork at a higher price? And I don't mean about making pork unaffordable for the rest of the world, because I don't like the word cheap. I like the word affordable protein. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the metrics that we use to measure that is, are we doing what it takes at the National Pork Board to be a catalyst? Because that's what we are. We don't own pigs. We don't own pork. We're a catalyst of information. And so at the end of the day, is the information that we are putting in the hands of packer processors or producers or international markets, is that driving volume and value? Because at the end of the day, our stakeholders, the investors in this business, are producers. And so my passion is around, how can I make every piece of that pig worth more money so that our farmers, through consumer pull-through, can make more money and increase their margin?
And candidly, that's the concern about issues like Prop 12 in California. The measures imposed on producers, the concern is you've raised the cost to produce that protein, and now we've we've raised the cost of that protein to probably a portion of society that depends on affordable protein. So that's the tension, right? That we as an industry need to face.
Right. Yeah. And while we're not a policy organization, I will just say one thing about that is you can't ignore a market that has 40 million consumers.
Right.
That's right.
15% of our consumption in the U.S. right there.
We have to focus on it, like it or leave it.
Yep.
It's a critical market, and it has a critical consumer base that we know over indexes on pork.
It's an interesting conundrum in some ways, though, Gordon. You talk about making sure that for the people like in California that want the protein. I just bought a whole bunch of ribs to smoke, and I don't know what I paid for those ribs, David. It was I think it was they were on sale under $3 or right around $3 a pound, and that makes it very attractive from my perspective. I had to cook 15, 20 pounds of ribs. It's like, that's pretty attractive compared to going and buying the beef at this high level. So I think we got to be really careful about affordability versus profitability, and how do we manage both of those at the same time, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And Dr. Spronk being on the board of directors, we have this conversation quite often. Is how do you measure success? Right. We want to put pork in the hands of as many consumers as possible. I could put my old producer hat back on here and say, Tom, everybody needs to make a margin here. We just went through the worst 18 to 24 months that the industry's ever seen. And I think that now when we reflect on that, we can take a very strong lesson in why we need to keep reminding that future consumer about what we're going to do next.
So Dave, help us understand also the drivers for the consumer when it goes to the market. What are the reasons why they buy pork? I mean, what are they looking for in this? Help us understand then the role of how do we achieve that for pork?
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of who the consumer is. This is really important to start with. So let's make this very easy. For the last 20 or 30 years, baby boomers have carried the weight. They've carried the weight on both consumption and purchasing power.
He's talking about you, Tom, but go ahead, David. Yeah.
We're not going to get into that, right?
No.
But the reality is the boomers are the aging population. They're retirement age. Mm-hmm. They are quite literally exiting the market in big numbers every day, but also they're just eating less. And that makes sense, right? Where we're at risk here is that the children of boomers eat 3/4 the amount that their parents ate. The children of them eat half the amount, and that their children are going to be forecasted to eat less than that. So the generations we need to focus on, while the boomer population, by the way, is still critically important to this business, you cannot ignore them. They love pork. They like to buy pork. It's a part of their routine set. We need to focus on millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah, I think that's great. So that's when you make the statement "market at risk." That's your statement and your fear, right there. And it strikes me, having heard this now a few times now, Tom and Monsi talking to David, is it comes down to two things with those generations, maybe three. One, they don't know how to cook the product.
Exactly.
No. So now you can handle smoking ribs, but so Monsi, now I see you shaking your head. Okay.
I want something easy. I don't even want to have to cook, right?
Okay.
I want something easy, nutritious, that tastes good. Do it for me.
And you can do it in what, 20 minutes? Right?
Even less. I have to run to a hockey game or a baseball game, so I only have 20 minutes to feed my children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
David, there's your opportunity to respond to that. Right?
So many things I want to say to that. So let me give you a few really interesting statistics. So I'm going to tell you this too, when I start this, to say it's not a sales pitch, but what we're doing at the National Pork Board today is transformational, and it's different than we've ever seen since this was started in 1987. We're making fact and data-based decisions, something that scientists on this call can really appreciate, right? We just got through doing a huge consumer segmentation study, which almost any major brand would do, right? And what does a consumer segmentation mean? It means you got to know who your customer is before you go try to sell them something, whether it is toilet paper or it's pork. You need to know who they are. And we break ours categorically, into 7 segments. We can talk about that maybe another time. But let's talk about what they want. And Monsi, you bring up a very important fact. So 3 things that matter the most to consumers: taste and flavor. If you don't like the way something tastes, you're not going to buy it again. If you don't like the way your favorite drink tastes, you're not going to buy it again. Taste and flavor, number 1. Number 2 is balance. Balance is another word for nutrition. Balance. They want balance. They also want other options. And Tom, you mentioned meal kits, right? They want to not just eat pork as center of the plate anymore, folks. They want pork as an ingredient. They want something like carnitas that they can add to chips. They want something they can put on a salad. They want something that can be a diverse. Think about the multicultural market and the growth of things like ramen, right? Mm-hmm. Where pork is a big piece as an ingredient. It's no longer just what we probably all grew up with. I certainly did, right? A big, thick, bone-in center cut chop right in the middle of the plate. That's not what they want. And the third thing, and this is crucial, is convenience. Yeah. So taste, balance, convenience. That's what all market segmentation says. And I'll give you a little statistic. Actually, it just was published on one of our dashboards yesterday. There are more Americans today that own an air fryer than own a coffee maker.
Interesting.
Yeah. We have to understand what they want and how they want to prepare it, because it is still about meals and minutes. So air fryer is very important. Instapot is still very important. It replaced the crock pot you got 25, 30 years ago, right? And then we do start talking now about other cooking technology like the at-home sous vide.
Sous vide.
And it's huge. Now, here's the catch to our business. We have been in the bulk meat business for a very long time. There's a lot of products that won't fit in the first 2 categories.
You can't put my ribs aren't going to work.
Tom, don't take your whole loin and put it in a sous vide. Yeah.
No, the loin.
No, but let's ask that question, because I mean, our audience, I want to tell the producers some of these will happen at the post-processing, I guess. But what can the producers do really to get ready or to prepare for these new consumers?
Yeah, well, I have a portion of my team who works just with retailers. I have a portion of my team who works just with food service operators. I have a portion of my team who just works with registered dietitians and physicians. We have researchers on staff. We have international market development specialists. All of those people all day, every day. I was just looking at this translated to Japanese piece that's sitting around my desk, are trying to put that link between buyers and sellers and in consumers' hands. Now, there's another discussion there, Monty, to your question, is about producing the type of pig that works well in this market.
Yeah, we've got critics out there right now that are suggesting that a big part of what we just went through in the last 18 to 24 months in the industry with the economic situation had a lot to do with the fact that we've got the wrong product.
Tom, let's get specific. The answer to every question is about our problem is we need a specifically colored boar. That's what critics are saying, that, gosh, that's what producers should do. It turns out it's more complex than that, right?
Well, I think it is, but I think it's still good to do some self-reflection on this and continue to think about, how are we going to, you talked about convenience, you talked about balance, and those things are related to what kind of product you're producing, right? So if you get something that's way too lean, that's going to make it a little more challenging to put it into the ready to eat category of product.
So David, what's your comments on this discussion?
So here's my comments. Regardless of, there's a lot of opinions out here in this world, but remember what I said: taste and flavor lead the discussion. balance and convenience, but you have to start with this taste and flavor. So let's be real. I'm a meat scientist by training. I've published a lot of work around this area of pork quality for the last 20 years. And what I would say is that certainly there are things we can do to improve the attribute of eating quality, right? Juicy, tender flavor. That's what consumers want, and it's what they need, and it's what they expect, to be fair. There are certainly things that we can do, whether they're genetic strategies or they're feeding strategies to get us there. But we can't put the cart before the horse here. Okay. So we do have a lot of that pig that is really, really good when it comes to those characteristics. Okay. No one ever talks about, there's certain cuts, right, that we know can drive on flavor and we can drive on taste. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every loin I've ever eaten in my life was amazing. Okay. Because it wasn't. But what I will tell you is that there is way better pork quality in this country today than there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I say that when you create consumer pull-through and you drive demand, the first lesson you learn in economics is supply and demand. If you have enough consumers that are pulling on demand, what will therefore happen is it will increase the margin of everybody in the chain, including producers, and that will allow them the flexibility and the incentive to think about improving attributes, to think about improving genetics, and then to think about, let's think different about how we could possibly change some of these things. But first and foremost, we have to make the product relevant to our consumers. And I know it may sound counterintuitive because someone might say, oh, you're making a product that doesn't taste. Some of the items we have maybe not have as much taste and flavor. But the reality is when you segment consumers, there is one segment of consumer, and I'll tell you what we call them categorically. We call them mindful choice makers. And they have a very specific pattern of the way they buy. And they want lean. Balance is their number one. They want something that is not fatty. So knowing who they are and where they live is important.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think from the perspective of what you talked about with center of the plate versus now just being an ingredient, isn't that critical also to that next generation, right? And with that, I think about poultry, and we got them beat all over the place from my perspective, when it comes to flavor and a raw product to start with, and what we can do with it that's flavorful and nutritious. But the reality is poultry's found a way to make it so even though it's just chicken, you can put it with all these other ingredients and people buy it like crazy, right?
Yeah.
So there's lessons to learn there.
There are lessons to learn. Let's settle on this one simple thing. Pork is delicious and it is nutritious.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that we're driving that across the business.
And maybe we want to wrap up very quickly, but I don't want to end without a comment about pork and sustainability. Maybe, this might be, David, we may need to have you back to dive into all that topic in more detail, but just where does pork fall in all the environment and all the discussions on the environment and sustainability?
Sure. Well, what I would say to that is that modern pork production in the United States is amazing. It is setting the global trend. We are doing more today around sustainability and freedom to operate than we have ever done before. And I think we need to celebrate the things that our producers do, the incredible cost that we do because of something we love to do, to be good neighbors, to be friendly to the environment, right, and to be good to our consumers. And that's why when we talk about our Wheat Care initiative or those type of things, it's people, pigs, and planet. And I was telling my staff in a team meeting yesterday, Monsi, we were talking about this because they don't all come from a pork background. I say, this is a very emotionally charged business. And people who raise pigs, they're not doing it thinking just about the money first. They're doing it because they're passionate about it, and they want to be good neighbors, and they want to create the best product for consumers.
So before we end, what's your favorite pork product, David?
Well, I mean, naturally, I think I'm going to have to go to bacon here, folks, because
that's right. Yeah.
Good.
I'll give you one little stat: 20% of people 20% of vegetarians still eat bacon.
It's the way to a vegan. It's the way to a vegan's heart.
So, Tom, what's yours?
I told you earlier, my youngest son just had his 40th birthday party this week, and I smoked somewhere between 15 and 20 pounds of ribs for the family, and there was nothing left. Yeah. And by the way, just in general, when I'm gone, the average consumption is what, David? About 50 pounds in the U.S. per person.
Yep.
They're going to have to find 4 people to replace me. So it's
Me too.
and Gordon, yours.
Well, I really like David already took my answer, bacon, but I want to tell you why, because I just completed my annual physical at Mayo and they handed me a book on about low carb, high fat diet. They actually told me, because of my metabolic profile, hey, you need to eat more fat. Well, guess which one product in pork that has high fat and gets my fat consumption plus protein? Well, that's bacon.
way to go.
Hey, and mine, so I want to say mine. Mine is the dry sausages. So I'm maybe a different consumer. And the Iberian ham from Spain. So by dry sausages, I grew up eating pork every day, and that's my favorite. So with that, see you next time at the meeting. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim. The views, opinions, or positions expressed are those of the speakers and may not reflect those of any other organization.